Hello there, welcome back to the booth here at Pro Tour Aether Revolt. That's Luis Scott Vargas, I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. We're ready for semifinal number 2. This is going to determine our other finalists, who gets to play against Marcio Carvalho. In the finals, we've got Lucas Esper Berthoud. He is playing against Eduardo Sajgalik. Sit down to the feature match area for semifinal number 2. Hello and welcome to coverage of Pro Tour Aether Revolt. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Luis Scott Vargas, and it's time for semifinal number 2. We are deep into the top 8 on Sunday here in Dublin, and we've got Eduardo Sajgalik. He plays for Team MTG Mint Card. He comes from Canada. His opponent on the other side of the table, Lucas Esper Berthoud. He is playing Mardu Vehicles as well. He plays for Team Dex Third. He's from Brazil, and we are ready to get underway. Luis, Mardu Vehicles mirror matches abound in the feature match area. We'll be seeing that in the final, no matter the result of this match. Fast and furious, man. This thing goes quick.
It does. A lot of these matches are really dictated by who has 1-drops, who can play a 1-drop plus a 2-drop on turn 3. And, as you can see, both players are ready and equipped to fight this battle with a lot of really early plays.
That's right. Scrap Heap Scrounger is left behind. Lucas had a really nice 1-2 there. Fatal push, though, taking out the Toolcraft Exemplar that he had played on the first turn of the game, and now we've got 2 Scrap Heap Scroungers staring at each other, and you can see how this matchup goes quickly. No blocking need apply here.
Yeah, not only can Scrap Heap Scrounger not block, Toolcraft Exemplar does not block particularly well, and vehicles in general are just not known for their defensive capabilities. So you're going to see a lot of racing past each other, a lot of removal spells clearing the way, and yeah, these are going to be fast games.
Veteran Motorist is the play for Lucas, and man, he has used up all of his mana from turn 1 to turn 3 here. He's got an Inventor's Apprentice as well.
Yeah, this is the start I was talking about. 1-drop plus 2-drop plus 2-drop plus 1-drop on turn 3. And what that really also does is, because Lucas is on the play, because he has such a good curve, it rewards him for being the person being more proactive, because Eduardo's Scrap Heap Scrounger just doesn't do anything on defense, and given that Lucas is winning the race, that's not very good for Eduardo, because even though Scrap Heap Scrounger is a great card, an integral part of the deck, it doesn't really do a whole lot for you when you're too far behind.
Pair of Unlicensed Disintegration in hand for Eduardo Sajgalik, and he's going to use one of those right now.
See if he either has to use Spire of Industry for red mana or use his energy from Aether Hub.
And he's going to use the energy up. That takes down the Veteran Motorist on the other side, but that means that Eduardo's scheduled to take 5 damage here, minimum. Yeah,
and the critical thing here, Lucas got to trade a 2-mana spell for a 3-mana spell, and Lucas was on the play. So that leaves Lucas ahead that Inventor's Apprentice, and now is the first person to refill the board. So now it just snowballs from there.
He has spent every single bit of mana from turns 1 through 4.
Yeah, and now he's up by a lot.
Big advantage to Lucas here. He's empty-handed with a clue on the battlefield, but it's just a beautiful curve. Aggro players the world around are going to be like, that is nice. Everybody's jealous of Lucas for that curve out there. 1, 2, 3, 4, use up all your mana, and look at that board state facing down just a single Scrap Heap Scrounger. Eduardo's hand looks powerful. He's got another Unlicensed Disintegration, a Gideon, and a Heart of Kirin, but it's just too slow.
Yeah, he's going to be able to play either Unlicensed Disintegration, Gideon, or Heart of Kirin, but all those only essentially trade for 1 attacker, and PNLR, if Eduardo chooses to play a blocker, PNLR can clear the blocker out of the way, maybe sacrifice a clue to make the creature unable to block. So Eduardo does not have a whole lot of great ways back into this.
That's another thing we've seen from this Mardu Vehicles deck, is that it is not good when playing from behind and requires very specific sequences in order to come back.
So if Lucas were to attack with everything, he's threatening 8 points of damage. Eduardo will crew the Heart of Kirin with Scrap Heap Scrounger. That is clearly why he left the card back. PNLR could then throw a clue or a Thopter. Look, 9 points of damage even with a Thopter. He could throw a clue or a Thopter at the blocker, and even if he doesn't have anything else to spend his mana on, use Pia to pump for an additional point of damage. So this is going to be a good turn for Lucas.
Yeah, Lucas is going to send in everybody. And as you predicted there, Luis, he decides to sacrifice one of his artifacts that ended up being the Thopter. He values an additional card from the clue later, even higher. And wow, Heart of Kirin was the draw step there for Lucas as well. Eduardo Sajgalik down to 4 and on the ropes very quickly here in this first game of our second semifinal match.
Yeah, at this point, Eduardo can play, again, essentially another blocker in the form of getting Make a Knight, or use Unlicensed Disintegration to do something like kill Pia. Still is just going to take lethal next turn. Barring, he can go to 1. He can kill Pia with Unlicensed Disintegration to prevent her from stopping blocks. He can then animate Heart of Kirin to block Lucas's Heart of Kirin, and then fall down to 1. But that's not a winning line, even though that does keep him alive for another turn.
Yeah, that's also disregarding whatever Lucas draws for his turn. He can easily find something. Eduardo's going through the thought processes here to see if he has any chance to stay alive.
Yeah, the problem is the outcome of that turn, despite Eduardo surviving, is that Lucas still has 3 creatures in play to essentially Eduardo's none, because Scrap Heap Scrounger is still not doing a great job blocking, and Eduardo's at 1. So where he goes from there, we'll see.
Well, looks like Unlicensed Disintegration on Pia Nalar. It's going to drop 11. Lucas down to 11, but doesn't seem particularly relevant. And Lucas assembles his army. Draws his card for the turn. Remember, he's got a clue he can crack as well. There's an Aether Hub off the top. He's going to sacrifice the clue, draw a card. It was an Aether Sphere Harvester that he drew for the turn, but
well, what that can do is let him crew the Harvester and then use the Harvester to crew the Heart of Kirin, which
so he can actually use his Inspector to crew up the Heart of Kirin, sort of delayed.
Right, by process of getting in the Harvester, flying up to the Heart of Kirin, and jumping in the Heart of Kirin, and crewing from there. And then that means that Eduardo still has to block Heart of Kirin and then takes lethal damage from Scrap Heap Scrounger plus Inventor's Apprentice.
Well, it looks like Lucas decides to do this the good old-fashioned way. He's just going to apply pressure and end up killing Eduardo next turn when he plays the Aether Sphere Harvester post-combat.
I go? Yeah.
Well, he's giving him an extra draw step.
Yeah, not one Eduardo can do much with.
Yeah, I don't think Eduardo can really punish him for that. And that's going to do it. Eduardo Sajgalik packs up the cards, and Lucas Esper Berthoud takes down game number 1. Eduardo still with a smile on his face there. But that is going to do it for our first game here in our second semifinal match. 1 to the good for Lucas Esper Berthoud. We'll be back after these messages.
Aether Revolt is now available in Magic Duels. Build endless deck combinations with more than 1,000 unique cards. Play through hours of story with over 50 campaign missions. Play Magic Duels free today on Xbox One, Steam, iPad, and iPhone.
Ready to take your game to the next level and start on the path to the Pro Tour? Rise to the challenge and test your skills at a local preliminary Pro Tour qualifier. To find an event near you, visit magic.wizards.com/pptq.
Welcome back to the feature match area here in Dublin, Ireland. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Hall of Famer Luis Scott Vargas, and we are one game down in our second semifinal match. I can tell you, for those of you just tuning in, that Marcio Carvalho from Portugal has advanced to the finals, and he will be awaiting the winner of this match. We are playing a best 3 out of 5. This is the second game. There will be no sideboarding for this game. After this game, we will be introducing sideboards. Scrap Heap Scrounger on turn 2 from Eduardo. Lucas, on the other hand, no turn 1 play.
Yeah, sure. And neither player opened on turn 1. So that is parity at the very least. And Eduardo, because he went first, has the ability to kind of seize the initiative here. And he has a Fatal Push in hand, which does let him play something like Heart of Kiran or Veteran Motorist this turn, and then follow it up with Fatal Push on Lucas's Veteran Motorist.
Scrap Heap Scrounger hits the red zone. And there's the Cultivator's Caravan setting up that Fatal Push. Yeah,
another card that gained a lot of value in this deck because of Fatal Push. Not every team played it. You see a number of these decks in the top 8 without Cultivator's Caravans in them, but Caravan into Fatal Push, Caravan into Shock, those are some of the ways to really get value out of the 3-mana artifact.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen that be quite powerful. You look for the little ways to go bigger than your opponent in these type of matchups, and this is definitely one of them. Fatal Push is going to take down the Veteran Motorist, but Aether Sphere Harvester for Lucas can do a lot of work if you can get it crewed and up in the air.
Well, luckily for Eduardo, he's got Veteran Motorist plus Heart of Kiran, so he can play them both using the Cultivator's Caravan here, and that threatens a 5/5 blocker. Of course, Lucas then has an Unlicensed Disintegration in hand, but he would have to be able to play a land and Thraben Inspector, which he does have the mana for. He can play Plains, Thraben Inspector, use that to crew Aether Sphere Harvester, and then attack into Heart of Kiran without fear thanks to that Unlicensed Disintegration. The Scry from Veteran Mode is really key in this deck. This is how this deck wins the longer games. Make sure it hits its land drop on turn 3 and doesn't hit its land drop on turn 6. It mitigates mana flood and mana screw quite nicely.
Well, Eduardo's going to get aggressive here. He's going to attack for 9. It's a huge hit of damage, dropping Lucas down to 8 life.
And Eduardo opted to attack with the Cultivator's Caravan instead of playing 2/2 this turn because his 4th land was Inspiring Vantage, which does come into play tapped here.
I see. So is Eduardo trying to pick a fight with an Aether Sphere Harvester here? That seems like a tough race to win.
Well, Aether Sphere Harvester, despite gaining lifelink, Lucas has enough energy to do that twice, still doesn't do a great job against the attacks that Eduardo has, and well, you see the result of that is Lucas deciding not to attack with the Aether Sphere Harvester.
Harvester's not a fantastic blocker against the 6/6, but...
No, but Lucas left up Unlicensed Disintegration, so his plan is to snipe Cultivator's Caravan with Unlicensed Disintegration and have Harvester in play to dissuade something like Scrap Heap Scrounger from attacking. It falls apart a little bit if Eduardo has his own copy of Unlicensed Disintegration, but Lucas may be getting to the point where he doesn't have really easy ways to defeat that anyway. And here we see another interesting play that's, Eduardo has an option of making, which is he could not crew the Cultivator's Caravan in attack because Lucas has left up such an obvious Unlicensed Disintegration. There's just not that many reasons to leave up 3 mana, especially in such a low curve deck. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Eduardo decided not to attack with the Caravan this turn.
Go. And he just says go. Eduardo knows what's going on.
And Lucas, I think, at this point, is basically forced to cast Unlicensed Disintegration.
Yeah, he just can't leave that much mana fallow. So he's going to go ahead and fire that off just to take down one of the Veteran Motorists. And Eduardo's like, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, and that was a great exchange for Eduardo. He traded Veteran Motorists for Unlicensed Disintegration. His vehicles were safe from being targeted. And it just forced Lucas to use a removal spell on something he didn't really want to. And this is kind of the situation you discussed earlier, which is Lucas is behind, and Aether Sphere Harvester aside, a lot of his cards are not good defenders, Veteran Motorists and Scrap Heap Scroungers and whatnot. Though the Harvester itself does do a pretty good job of keeping back the 3-power creatures.
7.
Yeah, Veteran Motorist, very annoying from Lucas's perspective on the other side of the table, just because his Harvester could block everything outside of that Caravan, but even the Heart of Kiran can attack past it now.
Lucas does have his own veteran motorist, so the Harvester is effectively a 4/6, which gives him a few more options.
That's nice.
One thing Eduardo can also do is you can crew your 2 vehicles in attack, but not use veteran motorists, and then just later crew them in combat just to get the +1/+1, even if they're already crewed.
Yeah, I like that. Lucas is fighting fire with his own veteran motorist, keeping his vehicles just ahead, though still the Cultivator's Caravan could be problematic. Of note, Lucas is down to 1 energy. And now Eduardo gets to decide how he wants to approach this turn. Okay, he's going to crew up both vehicles.
Combat.
The one that got crewed by the veteran motorist is the Heart of Kirin. So it's a 5/5. The other one's already a 5/5. And he's going to attack with both.
Eduardo drew pretty much the best card he could draw, which is looks like an unlicensed disintegration, which means that if Lucas crews Aethersphere Harvester, then he actually just straight up dies to Heart of Kirin. If he doesn't crew Aethersphere Harvester, well, he takes damage and then dies to Heart of Kirin.
Right. And Lucas feels like he doesn't have a choice, but yes, unlicensed disintegration finishes the job here. That's going to knock Lucas down to 4, then he's going to take 5 in the air. And now we've got it all evened up. One apiece here. Here the players really enjoying their fans cheering them on from the crowd. Also behind them you can see players playing as well. In fact, let's take a look over there. There's a Johnny taking in the sights, and some pros and locals coming to watch. It's always nice. It's a lot more chill environment on a Sunday in the hall. Now, once you get to the feature match area, it gets ramped up significantly, but it's pretty hangout over there.
Well, except for the 8 players in the top 8, and at this point we're at far fewer than that. All these other players, the tension is kind of gone from their weekend. Like, they're relaxing, they're having fun, they're unwinding. You're not playing, the Swiss rounds of a Pro Tour where every win matters so much.
Yeah, and what better way to unwind than a little booster draft? We've got sideboards to take a look at here as well. Let's take a look at Lucas's sideboard. What is he working with out of his? I mean, this is going to be one of the places that these players can get an edge since we are facing a lot of mirror matches. Lucas
has a pretty substantial sideboard for the mirror. 2 copies of Release the Gremlins, which can kill Heart of Kirin or Cultivator's Caravan, put some gremlins into play. Sky Sovereign, Console Flagship, another very good threat on 5. And then Sky Whaler Shot and Fatal Push and Fragmentize, so a bunch of removal too. So I really like the plan of good late game cards plus early removal. And it looks like Lucas has come ready for this matchup. He even can board in a Cultivator's Caravan and a Needle Spires if he wants more mana sources to go along with his Sky Sovereigns.
Do you like bringing in 2 Sky Sovereigns?
I assume he would want to bring in both, yeah.
Double boat? All right, let's take a look at Eduardo's sideboard plans. It looks significantly different on this side.
It does. First of all, Eduardo looks like he prepared for kind of a different suite of decks, and his plan for the mirror is, I would say, less impactful than Lucas's. I did see him bring in Spell Queller in his last match in the mirror, and that looks like it could have a good effect here, both as a way to counter anything and as a way to ambush, like I saw it ambush up here in Nalar. Shock and Sky Whaler Shot are also good options as just, interactive spells.
Now, Fumigate's too slow here, right?
Fumigate, especially if your opponent knows you have Fumigates in your deck, is not the optimal situation. And against a vehicles deck, Fumigate just too often is just going to end up too awkward. That's more of a card against decks that have cards like Virtuous Gearhulk, like a black-green deck.
Okay. Well, this is where we transition over to the sideboarded games. That's why we showed you those. The first 2 games of our 5-game match, or best of 5 match, I should say, are unsideboarded. And the rest of the games from here on out, the players will have access to their sideboards, so things can get interesting from here. They also have access to deck lists, and you mentioned that briefly, Luis. That's, of course, a kind of a tournament integrity measure that we take. Everybody knows each other's deck lists, and they can just look at them.
Yeah, you can look at them in between games, and not during the game. But yeah, once you're in the top 8, deck lists are essentially public information. They're displayed on Magic, or on the Magic webpage, on Twitter, everywhere. So having the players not have to memorize their opponent's deck list when they're access to is fine.
Have you ever wanted to look at your own deck list during a game?
Oh yeah.
Let's take a look at one of the key cards in the matchup that we've seen come up time and time again. We looked at some of the threats with Ian. How about Unlicensed Disintegration as one of the best answers?
It's a premier removal spell. All of the Mardu Vehicles deck are playing 4. The Jund Energy aggro deck that Martin Yuza played was also playing 4. And just kills everything and hits your opponent for an additional 3 points of damage. So a pretty impactful card in this current standard format. And in fact, Owen Turnwall, I was just talking to him before this round started, he claimed it was the best card in standard. So it's interesting to see where this lands.
Like the flavor text there. That is sage advice when somebody's firing up an Unlicensed Disintegration. Also brings up a lot of questions about how licensing works in Kaladesh.
What or who is allowed to be disintegrated?
Yeah, I was hoping we'd see a Licensed Disintegration in Aether Revolt. What would that card do?
Licensed Disintegration, well, still clearly would destroy something. I feel like it would, instead of black, it would be like red-white or something.
Yeah.
It seems like white is the consulate they would offer the licenses. Probably be more expensive. Obviously, you get it cheaper without a license.
Yeah, that's for darn sure. Yeah, we're tackling all the important discussions here on Pro Tour Sunday. Let's take a look at Cultivator's Caravan. This is, I was mentioning this when we were having this discussion in the game as well, that, you look for, when you have two aggressive decks like this that are going against each other, you look for ways to go just a little bit slower than your opponent. You don't want to take that normal one turn slower approach that you would hope for, in some type of a mid-range mirror match. If you do that, you're just too slow. But cards like Cultivator's Caravan can help give you a mana advantage and produce a potent attacker at the same time.
It's also a key part of these 4-color vehicles decks. Paulo Vitor Damarosa and Eduardo Sajgalik both played Cultivator's Caravans just because they thought they needed more black sources for Fatal Push, more blue sources for cards like Metallic Rebuke or Spell Queller. And, of course, does tap for red or white mana. It can still do that. And we've seen these decks kind of enable 4 colors worth of cards, and Cultivator's Caravan is part of that.
Yeah, curving that into a 1-drop, super powerful, and then you get to untap and start bashing for a ton.
Yeah, it's a mana source / mana fixer that also later in the game, or maybe even next turn, attacks as a 5/5. So it has served as an important part of some of these decks, depending on how consistent you want your mana base to be and how you build your sideboard.
Would you call the mana good in these decks? I mean, you mentioned it's 4 colors. It's stretched out a bit, but it has a couple of different lands that can make any color in the deck under the right conditions. Is it good mana?
I think the mana is overall good. The fast lands like Spire Bluff Canal or Concealed Courtyard, Inspiring Vantage, are very powerful in a deck with such a low curve. And Aether Hub is decent. Aether Hub, I've actually seen some of these decks playing 1 or 2 Aether Hubs because without other energy generation, it's a little risky. But really what makes the mana base is Spire of Industry. That card allows these decks to legitimately have good mana as opposed to, Pro Tour Kaladesh, where we saw this deck. Li Shijian did top 8 with 4-color vehicles, but I thought his mana was okay, not good.
Mm-hmm. But Spire of Industry kind of put it over the top.
Spire of Industry definitely did. And it also made it so you didn't have to have Cultivator's Caravan, where Li Shijian's deck had Cultivator's Caravan as a concession to having not as good of mana.
All right, looks like we're underway in game number 3 between these two players.
Go. Sure.
And I was going to say no 1-drop for Lucas, but that would have been a lie because he did actually have a 1-mana spell. It was Fatal Push to take down the Toolcraft Exemplar from Eduardo, and a Heart of Kirin follow-up play. Pretty nice. A Toolcraft Exemplar on turn 2 here for Eduardo. Not super exciting, and if Lucas can get things rolling, and he definitely can get things rolling now, this one's going to be over pretty quickly if Eduardo doesn't find an answer for this Heart of Kirin.
And Eduardo does have 2 answers, 2 unlicensed disintegrations, but this goes back to the discussion we were just having. He doesn't have any black mana.
Yeah, wow. Spire Bluff Canal is his only other land in hand. And he's got a very reactive card with Metallic Rebuke as well. Not what he wants to see when he's getting smashed. Wow, what a turn here for Lucas as well. He even had a Toolcraft Exemplar to add to the battlefield.
Yeah, and because Eduardo can't cast Unlicensed Disintegration, and his 2-drop was another Toolcraft Exemplar without having an artifact,
he just does nothing for the turn.
This game is very close to being over, as these games tend to be.
He can't even cast Gideon next turn unless he finds an untapped white mana source.
And as good as the fast lands are, by the time you get to turn 4, they become significantly less fast. So a top deck Concealed Courtyard, despite fixing Eduardo's colored mana problems, won't let him cast spells right away. It will enter the battlefield tapped.
Geez, you blink, and that advantage bar jumps over to one player or the other. These matches are going so quickly.
Okay. Attack for 7.
And Eduardo also, citing in Metallic Rebuke is a concession to cards like Sky Sovereign. Makes sense, but on the draw, it does have some pretty big risks, and this is one of them. It's just way too reactive and slow for how this game is played out.
Pure disaster, too. Lucas just passes the turn back. He doesn't even have a target for it. And let's just scoop up our permanents. That was Lucas winning game number 2. You can see his teammates and fans cheering him on. They have been restraining themselves while the game is going, just to make sure that it doesn't interfere in any way with the game. Even with the big headsets on our players, they can still hear that kind of screaming. And there they are. You can see Thiago Saporito in the middle, kind of leading the charge. Feels like a soccer match.
I believe they'd call it a football match. Yeah.
They would. But I'm American, and so I got to just say it how I know. Take a look at a little bit of a quieter scene here on Pro Tour Sunday. As we work our way through, man, these have been so fast. So this is Lucas Esper Berthoud. He is now up 2-1 over Eduardo, and with just one more victory, will find himself in the finals. Just by way of history, Lucas, this is his 6th Pro Tour, so didn't take him too long to just a little over a season here to find his first Pro Tour top 8. He's playing for Team Dex 3rd. It was one of the Dex teams. And then Eduardo, this is his 17th Pro Tour played, so he's been around for a while, and he, in fact, had already had a Pro Tour top 8 back in 2012 in Seattle, so this is his second pre-T top 8.
Yeah, I've played against Eduardo a number of times since, like you said, he has been playing for a while. He's also competed in nationals various times, and both worlds, the team competition and the World Magic Cup, as got iterated on through the years.
Mm-hmm. Here's a lot of the players enjoying a more relaxing tone than they've had. Playing the big PT matches, every single match counts. Here, you get matches like this. The big rig, that's Neil Rigby on the right versus Alexander Hayne. Who do you like here? Gonna go for the PT champ?
It looks like they're in the middle of a draft, but I like the big rig. He's a nice guy.
He's also a very good drafter.
He is. He has multiple Grand Prix top 8s, 3 Grand Prix top 8s, actually.
Including one recently. I mentioned it earlier, but Neil, that was Neil Rigby there. He works with us on the coverage team. You'll see him in the feature match area. A lot of the times he's one of our spotters. He actually played in this Pro Tour. He qualified via Grand Prix top 8, and he came out here to battle.
He did decide he wanted to work on day 2, though, so.
Yes.
I'll play first. Okay.
Yeah, we put him to work. You heard Eduardo say, I'll play first.
I have not seen anyone seriously contemplate drawing in the limited or construct rounds of this tournament. Sometimes you do a limited. Very rarely you do in constructed,
yes.
But it has not happened to my knowledge here.
No, I've seen mono red mirror matches where people have chosen to take the draw because it ends up being an attrition battle where all of the burn spells can kill all of the opponent's small creatures, and you'd rather just have an extra card. But outside of that, when you're talking about 2 aggressive decks going up against each other, being on the play is actually just a massive advantage.
One of the actual keys to succeed.
What kind of key?
I didn't come up with this key, so I guess it wouldn't be technically.
Okay.
But I'm saying it, so maybe actually technically it is. Is being able to play a 1-mana removal spell, especially when you're on the draw. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if your opponent, like the green-black decks we saw who are playing Fatal Push, you see them lead with Blooming Marsh, so when their opponent played like a Veteran Motorist on turn 2, they could Fatal Push it.
Yeah, and we've seen Fatal Push be an absolutely fantastic card in these matchups. The ability to kill everything from the smaller creatures down on the ground all the way up to a big attacker like a Heart of Kiran has been super powerful. And most of the time, they don't even need Revolt to kill the thing that they want to kill with it.
Right. Well,
every now and then the Revolt does come up. I did like when Apollo Vitor Domidarosa Emblem Gideon to cast Fatal Push with
that
Revolt.
was clever. Yeah, I really enjoyed that as well. Okay, let's take a look at our opening 7 here. We're sitting with Eduardo Sajgalik from Canada. Does he have a keeper here?
Does not look like it.
Man, he has been mulliganing a lot in the feature match area. He has made his way. Remember, Eduardo had the long path to get here. He had to play in the Stage 1 quarterfinal, getting by a tough opponent in Martin Yuza, and then he had to play Liu Yuchen from China in the quarterfinal 2 to put himself here. But I got to tell you, he has been mulliganing a lot. It looks like Lucas has kept his hand this time.
Lucas has what looks like the perfect draw. He has Heart of Kiran to follow up his Toolcraft Exemplar with Thraben Inspector and PNLR. So he's like,
whoa. He's
maybe
like a removal spell away from
yeah,
glory
and he doesn't actually have black mana, so even if he drew a removal spell, he might not be able to cast it. But this is still, you would lock in this hand every single game of the tournament.
Well, let's hope for Eduardo's sake that he can at least keep a 6, because if he's up against a super tough 7, he could be in for a lot of work to try to stay alive here. He needs to win back-to-back games to make it to the finals of the Pro Tour.
Well, that's great.
All right, he's got a keeper here.
Yeah, very solid hand of his own. Turn 1 Toolcraft Exemplar, turn 2 Heart of Kiran, and Fatal Push. He's leaving a Scrap Heap Scrounger on top just because if Toolcraft Exemplar dies, he's going to want another creature that's able to accrue that Heart of Kiran.
By the way, you do see a shortcut happening between these two players pretty consistently. The Aether Hub did come in and create an energy, but he just used it right away, so why bother grabbing for a die? He's going to use it to make white mana for his Toolcraft Exemplar. Same start for Lucas as we described.
For you.
And there's that Heart of Kiran on the follow-up. That, of course, is going to let the Toolcraft Exemplar trigger and really leave Lucas Esper with no good blocks. So 17 for Lucas. Look familiar?
17 each.
It does.
There you go.
We don't call it a mirror match for nothing.
Well, Eduardo's hand is going to develop incredibly nicely here.
Ooh, he just drew a Spell Queller off the top.
That's
Energy.
quite strong here.
Can he... Yes, he does have the right mana to be able to cast it as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, so Eduardo had
7 you.
2 pretty solid options there. He can do what he did, which is the Scrounger to crew the Heart to attack for 7 and leave up Fatal Push, or he could have left up Spell Queller, but by doing this and being able to Fatal Push the Heart of Kiran and then have Spell Queller as a follow-up, I actually think Eduardo, despite Lucas's great hand, the fact that Eduardo was on the play and has I would say a comparable hand, actually slightly better thanks to Fatal Push, mean that Eduardo has the advantage even if he mulliganed.
Ooh, that's impressive stuff. You usually don't get much wiggle room here, but a solid 6-card hand from Eduardo Sajgalik has put himself a little bit ahead here of Lucas here in Game 4.
Okay.
Aether Hub for Lucas.
Yep.
Go to combat, trigger, let the trigger resolve, now crew up my Heart of Kiran, attack, and this is going to sting. This is Fatal Push from Eduardo, taking down the Heart of Kiran.
That's again, 1 drop, 2 drop, 2 drop plus 1 drop. That's how it adds up.
That's the formula.
Yeah.
And PNLR, nice magic card, but way behind here is Lucas.
Unlicensed Disintegration, fantastic draw because now if Lucas doesn't do some either chump blocking of a Heart or trading for a Scrap Heap Scrounger, neither of which are particularly enticing, he could just take lethal off of Unlicensed Disintegration. Actually, Eduardo can cast Unlicensed Disintegration. One thing he has to be wary of is if he casts either Disintegration or Spell Queller, he's locked out of casting the other because he's out of energy from Aether Hub. So he would need to draw another colored mana source in order to cast the other one. But let's say he casts Unlicensed Disintegration targeting PNLR. That'll drop Lucas to 7. Then you crew the Heart with either of your creatures, you force Chump Block on a Heart, and Lucas drops to 4, and you have 3 creatures out versus a Toolcraft Exemplar by itself.
You gotta love that board position.
Alternately, you can crew the Heart of Kiran with Toolcraft Exemplar, attack with Heart and Scrap Heap Scrounger, and then Pia potentially blocks.
Damage to make Fatal Push? Yeah, I counted it. Oh, I didn't. Sorry. Yeah, I was at 16.
Oh, no.
Oh, 16.
Yeah,
You did.
okay,
Yes.
okay.
Right. So.
See the players debate over whether how busy was the Spire of Industry.
Yeah, but as it turns out, they both said, well, yeah, we're both happy at 16, so we're good. And looks like, yes, he's going to be aggressive as Eduardo. He's going to use the Unlicensed Disintegration to take out PNLR and force that board state that you described, Luis. It looks good.
Again, this is a
He's
forced
still
play
getting
here.
in for 3. Yeah, it's just leaving your opponent at 4 with no blocker for your Heart of Kiran.
And you have 2 3/2s against Toolcraft Exemplar, which is notoriously bad on defense. So Lucas
is,
now...
Yeah, pondering his options, but they're not looking great.
He's got Heart of Kiran, but in order to crew it, he would have to tap all 3 of his creatures if he wanted to crew it on defense, because offense is not on the forefront of Lucas's mind right now, given the current life totals. And that means that Lucas is actually dead here unless he can do something like perhaps Thraben Inspector into a Fatal Push, but he actually wouldn't have... He'd be able to... He has the energy, so he can still add black mana. He can Fatal Push Heart of Kiran. He can chump.
This is a bit of a stretch, isn't it, Luis?
It requires the top card of his deck to be Fatal Push, so just starting from that point, it's already tough.
Yeah. Yeah, Eduardo looks like he is in a good spot here to even things up. Force game number 5.
It's okay.
He found a Scrap Heap Scrounger on the top of his library.
Combat trigger.
That's going to leave him with 2 other attackers.
And
is he playing around?
Yep.
Eduardo's playing around Unlicensed Disintegration or Fatal Push by not attacking with Heart of Kiran. And that's a way to kind of punish Lucas for leaving mana up while keeping a lethal flying threat just in play. It's a good play from Eduardo, even though he would have maybe won the game if he attacked this way. That's not going to work out as well as Lucas would like. There's actually 3 artifacts in
Yeah,
play.
he's got first strike, and he's just going to get to mow down these creatures. I think that might have been an oversight from Lucas.
I think immaterial to the outcome of the game because Lucas could not win this game.
But he wasn't going to win the game, and that's Eduardo Sajgalik finishing off Lucas Esper Berthoud, and that means, Luis, there's only one way to decide one of these things. Let's play a game of Magic.
Let's play a 5th game of Magic in this match, even.
And deciding. Yeah, just a single game here is going to decide who advances to the finals. Is it going to be Lucas? Is it going to be Eduardo? Marcio Carvalho will be interested to find out. And you can see multiple cheering sections out there. This one looks like it's Eduardo themed.
Yeah, Team MTG mint card cheering on their teammate there.
Who do you think Ajani's rooting for?
Who is Ajani rooting for? I guess neither player is playing a particularly Ajani-esque deck.
No, not at all.
So Ajani is probably rooting for whoever the bravest and most valorous is. We'll determine that with a game 5.
I mean, we see that, Ajani did get printed in Aether Revolt, and if you are in this realm, you probably have a vehicle. Makes you wonder, which of the vehicles would Ajani drive? Put it in the chat for us, or maybe tweet at us or something. I'm curious, which one of the vehicles that they printed would Ajani roll?
Yeah, just go ahead and tweet it at Marshall.
We're answering the tough questions here on Pro Tour Sunday. While the players that are done with their tournament, well, they play Magic, because that's what they do. Here it looks like a team draft of some sorts. A lot of times the players will get into teams of 3, so a 6-person draft, and then they'll break apart as they build their decks together and play against the other teammates. Here's some more side draft action. Some of your favorite players maybe in the mix. You get a chance to look at them in a little bit more of a casual environment. Here's some Team Channel Fireball
Recently departed top eighter Paulo Vitor Damarosa.
Yeah, that's right, and some face-to-face gamers in there as well. This is fun. I love looking at this view. Thumbs up, huh? All right, let's take a look at some of the other cards that we've seen time and time again in the feature match area, starting with Aether Hub. What a powerful land. This is one of those ones that lets you have any color of mana for once for free, and then if you have any other way to get energy going, you can tap for any color of mana consistently.
Aether Hub is quite powerful. We've seen it in the Marta Vehicles deck that actually don't really have any other energy synergies going on. Maybe an Aether Sphere Harvester here or there, but mostly it's just a 5-color one-shot land. You get one shot at adding a mana of any color to your mana pool, and then after that it just becomes a colorless land. You're seeing fewer copies of this in the Mardu Vehicles deck, especially I think the successful ones. But it is a 4 of in a lot of decks that have an energy theme, like we saw Martin Yuza playing Jund Energy Aggro, and Aether Hub, very important in that deck to both enable a 3-color mana base and to combo with cards like Harness Lightning, Long Tusk Cub, Greenbelt Rampager, and the like.
Continuing the mana base theme here, let's take a look at Spire of Industry, which is, you mentioned it, Luis, this is a card that really changed the mana bases for these Mardu vehicle decks significantly. And we call them Mardu vehicles, but a lot of times they splash for blue as well.
I think almost every single Mardu deck that we saw in the feature match or ended up having Metallic Rebuke in the sideboard as a kind of a concession to Torrential Gearhulk and Saheeli Rai combo decks alike, because it's a good disruptive card and it's enabled by Spire of Industry. Spire of Industry is what lets you play a 3 to 4 color mana base without much trouble. It comes to play untapped, and you cast your Heart of Kiran or you play your Thraben Inspector to get a clue, and all of a sudden Spire of Industry is working hard as ever.
Yeah, that card looks like it has some potential to be super, super powerful. A beacon of prosperity to some, a shadow of oppression to others. That's pretty dark stuff for a land that makes mana.
Given the number of Mardu Vehicles decks, Shadow of Oppression might be something. It's going to be a topic people are going to debate about. I think that this standard format has a lot of room to grow and develop, especially since a lot of the people I talked to about Grand Prix Pittsburgh next week, which is also standard, are opting towards playing something like Torrential Gearhulk as a reaction to Mardu Vehicles decks, or maybe tuning their Winding Constrictor deck in order to beat them. But right now, it's the vehicle's time to shine their headlights, as it were.
I was going to ask you about that, because when we see such dominating success at a Pro Tour like this from one deck, it does make you think, is this deck attackable? Do you think it is?
I think this deck's very attackable.
Okay.
It's a deck full of 1-toughness creatures and cheap artifacts and early drops, and it also has kind of a lot of removal spells for an aggro deck, so you can, attack it by playing ways to kill those early drops, playing artifact removal, or playing a deck with few to none creatures, so their unlicensed disintegrations and fatal pushes and shocks kind of end up being dead cards. So I'm not saying the Mardu Vehicles isn't a great deck. Clearly it's a great deck, but it's definitely one that you can solve.
Did you see your name on there?
I did not.
It was on there.
That rumor has it.
Luis, of course, won the Pro Tour back in 2008 in Berlin, and that got his name etched onto that trophy forever. We are ready, though, for game number 5. This is going to be the decider. This is going to determine who gets to go play against Marcio Carvalho for all that money and that trophy. All those pro points, everything on the line in the next match, but you've got to beat your opponent to get there. Let's see how this starts off. We've noticed, Luis, that you can take a lot about how the game's going to go by about turn 3. How are things shaping up so far?
Well, one of the things that Lucas really needs to watch out for here is Fatal Push. Without looking at Eduardo's hand, I see this opening and think Fatal Push. Then I actually get to look at his hand and also see Fatal Push. But that's why you would play Inspector into Inspector, leaving a black land up. So if Lucas can figure that out and end up in a spot where he's confident of it, he really does want to avoid animating that Heart of Kiran, crewing it this turn, and attacking into Fatal Push. If he can do that, then I like Lucas's chances here, especially since he has a hand that has a better mana situation than Eduardo. Eduardo just has these 2 lands, 2 black-white lands, and his hand has Spellqueller as a blue card, Shock as a red card, and 2 Gideons as 4 drops. He really can't cast much, so there's a chance that Eduardo just stumbles here.
Yep. Go ahead. Draw.
Eduardo draws his card for the turn.
Well, a very timely Aether Hub.
Yeah, that does give him, in fact, the blue mana that he can use
Go.
to play Spell Queller if you'd like.
And I like Eduardo's situation a lot more here because, first of all, Lucas's turn 3 was a release the Gremlins on a clue token, which is not the most exciting hand. Second, Eduardo, by drawing that blue source, even though it's not reusable, he would have loved to have Spire of Industry there. Playing Spell Queller on if Lucas taps out for a sorcery speed spell, and then being able to either draw a 4th land for Gideon or sack a clue, plus leave Fatal Push up, that puts Eduardo in a good spot. So it's going to really depend on what Lucas does this turn.
Well, he's going to start off with a Scrap Heap Scrounger, but Lucas, he is keen to what's going on. You can see he didn't just put that on the battlefield. He's put that onto the stack and says, does this resolve? Eduardo says, no. It certainly doesn't. Spellqueller's going to gobble that up. And the turn gets passed back to Eduardo.
So Concealed Courtyard, running into one of the disadvantages here. Can't cast Gideon this turn because it will enter the battlefield tapped. But I still like Eduardo's spot here. He's going to be able to attack for 2 in the air. He's got a clue he can crack, so he's not completely wasting his mana, and he's got a Fatal Push in hand. On the other hand, though, if Lucas can draw an untapped land and play a Sky Sovereign this turn, that would be a huge problem for Eduardo.
He could just take out that Spell Queller, get back his Scrap Heap Scrounger. Goodness sakes. Did he draw it?
He drew a Needle Spires, so unfortunately enters the battlefield tapped.
Still, he's at 17 life. If he gets to play a Skyship next turn, that's pretty good too, right?
And playing Gideon here still is going to be effective.
So he's going to get to go Gideon into Sky Sovereign. How in the heck is Eduardo supposed to beat that? I mean, given that Lucas is at 16 life and not scheduled to take some massive hit next turn.
You already... Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, you're right. Are you attacking?
Yeah.
So you see one of the interesting cards about...
Okay, draw a card.
one of the interesting things, I should say, about Heart of Kirin, which, by the way, is going to hit the graveyard of that Fatal Push, is that you can use your Planeswalker's loyalty to counter it, but it's not actually using the ability from the Planeswalker. So Lucas was able to make a Knight and then also crew up his Heart of Kirin.
So that Spire of Industry unfortunately no longer taps for any color because Eduardo doesn't have any artifacts in play. So that means if he wants to kill Gideon this turn, he does have an option here. He can play Gideon, use it to emblem, and the convenient thing about that is that it also will make his Spell Queller immune to the Sky Sovereign next turn. So this ends up being a very good turn for Eduardo.
Yeah, Eduardo really concerned with making sure that Gideon goes away while the shields are down, and he has the opportunity, but it's going to give him double duty with that Fort Toughness now as well, protecting that Scrap Heap Scrounger that is exiled by it, which is sitting kind of off to the side, but that's the one under the Spell Queller. So this is working out nicely for Eduardo. Interesting.
So now if Lucas plays the Sky Sovereign, he can kill one of the Thraben Inspectors, but he still can't attack with his other creatures because the other Thraben Inspector is a 2/3 thanks to the emblem, keeping back the Gremlin and the Knight. And now Eduardo may have an opportunity to just go Gideon Emblem again and just start racing. What Eduardo really needs to draw, though, is either a red source or an artifact to enable that Spire of Industry, because he's got 2 red cards in hand.
And still doesn't have an actual red source, 3 Concealed Courtyards.
Yeah.
Wow.
An Aether Hub with no energy and a Spire of Industry with no artifacts.
Brutal.
Still, being able to play Gideon this turn, what if Eduardo goes... If he wants to use another emblem, that means that he could attack with the Spell Queller and the Thraben Inspector, threatening 7 points of damage. If Lucas double blocks, the Fatal Push that Eduardo drew can kill one of the 2/2s. Thraben Inspector will then win that combat.
Now would Lucas just crew up the Sky Sovereign and block?
He could crew up the Sky Sovereign and block, so that doesn't work out quite as well. What Eduardo can do alternately is just Gideon and make a Knight, but then the Sky Sovereign actually threatens to fly over and attack. The fact that it can't kill the Spell Queller with the trigger is important, but...
It can't do the 3 damage to Gideon.
It can. That's one reason to just emblem again and make a 3/4 Thraben Inspector, potentially.
Tough spot here for Eduardo, and you can see he's taking his time as Luis and I work our way through the lines of play. Eduardo's, of course, doing the same thing from his spot.
He doesn't get to see Lucas's hand, though. I am trying to analyze it from where Eduardo's sitting.
Eduardo's going to use Fatal Push and kind of force the issue here. Do you want to make your Sky Sovereign alive, or do you want to keep back your Gremlin? It looks like Lucas says, yeah, okay. In response, I'm going to crew up my Sky Sovereign.
Eduardo could also play Gideon and hope that Lucas's last card isn't a creature, but Lucas always has the option of animating Needle Spires and using that plus the Gremlin to crew the Sky Sovereign, which is a circuitous route to get Sky Sovereign going, but it would actually work. I mean, Eduardo's priced into playing Gideon this turn. I'd be surprised if he didn't actually cast Gideon. The options are really making another emblem or make a Knight. I think just making the emblem means that you don't actually lose the Thraben Inspector, which is nice, but you do end up in a spot where you still can't attack into Sky Sovereign even with the second emblem.
Man, he really wishes he had that other red mana here, but
yeah, if he had
find it.
if he was able to cast Shock or Veteran Motorist, that would help him quite a bit here.
Ooh, Unlicensed Disintegration, though, from Lucas. That's going to kill the Spell Queller, and it's going to get him back his Scrap Heap Scrounger, which gives him the ability to crew. And what a huge swing for Lucas. Look at this.
Yeah, an Inspiring Vantage off the top, coming to play tapped. It's going to be very difficult for Eduardo to get back into this game. He's about to lose all of his creatures here.
Sky Sovereign completely dominating this board now. That was a massive swing towards Lucas, and he is getting tantalizingly close to the final. Whew.
So
what a setback.
Lucas can crew with the Scrap Heap Scrounger, and he can attack for 12 if he wants, using that Needle Spires, plus the Gremlin, plus the Sky Sovereign.
And still take out the Knight
while taking out the Knight with the trigger from Sky Sovereign.
I gotta say, that sounds tempting to me.
Sure.
Let's make sure Lucas attacks with that Needle Spires. There it is. Takes down the Knight, and yeah, that's a lot of damage. 12 damage, hitting Eduardo down to 5, and he may just have one draw step in one turn. He can't find what he needs here, and he has to extend the hand. Lucas Esper Berthoud is into the finals, much to the delight of his cheering section.
I drew this off the
We are going to have two different Dex teams in the finals here. It's Dex Third versus Dex Army. Marcio Carvalho playing against Lucas Esper Berthoud. Great stuff from our crowd there. That looks fun.
You either have the Skyruler shot, and then
maybe next time you top 8, I'll go. I'll go in the crowd.
Trying to give me a little additional incentive here. Is that what it is?
See if I can get some people.
Sure.
Hope they drew a bit better mana one.
Lucas now 11-0 in Constructed.
Yeah, he has yet to lose a match in Constructed. Great stuff from both of our players down there, stretching it all the way to Game 5. Some quick games in there. I kind of like what you were saying earlier, Luis, about how when you look at it by turn 3, you can start to get a real picture for how things are going to go. And that held true. And boy, there were some big top decks in there, but still it ended up being Lucas who puts himself into the finals against Marcio Carvalho. And as many of you have noted in the chat and on Twitter and such, we've got all Mardu vehicles left in the field. So it was going to be a Mardu vehicles
That was true coming into the semis.
Yeah, no matter what. The two...
True coming into the second round of the quarters, actually.
It was, yeah. The two non-Mardu vehicles decks got knocked out pretty early. So this is to be expected going forward. What that means is when we get to the finals, make sure you're in your seat and watching, because it's going to go by very quickly, perhaps, as these decks aren't super good at blocking. They're much better at applying pressure to each other and kind of just flying past. We've got some great stuff coming up for you, including an interview in just a moment here. Of course, we'll also be setting the stage at the news desk so that you can get an idea of who the players are that we're watching and maybe some bigger picture things from around the scene. But boy, quick this Sunday, hasn't it been, Luis?
Definitely. These decks tend to curve out. They have a lot of efficient spells, and they're not very good at blocking. So once someone gets behind, they tend to stay behind.
Any cards that come to mind as far as beating these? I mean, you mentioned Torrential Gearhulk as kind of a bigger picture view on an entire strategy. Is that the kind of thing that you'd want to play if you knew that people were playing a lot of this deck? Yeah,
I think Torrential Gearhulk is a good place to start a Fatal Push. I mean, these decks play it, but it is quite good in against it as well. So there's a lot of ways to build your deck to maximize that.
Yeah, I'm curious because I know a lot of you at home are busy jotting down or typing out deck lists right now about how they're going to beat this deck. And, for the most part, people try to approach it from two ways. They either say, well, I want to play that deck because it seems to be the best at the moment and I want to be able to beat the mirror, or I'm going to just take a different stance and just try to smash it. So get a little bit of the ball rolling on that from Luis. But in the meantime, we've got an interview on the tournament floor right now.
Hello, I'm here down on the tournament floor with Lucas Esper Berthoud now. So far this tournament, you have not lost a single round in Constructed. How good is this Mardu Vitals deck for those people at home?
It's pretty great. What else can I say? Martial is also doing pretty well. And I guess now it's time for the final showdown.
If you think the rounds previously have had some loud support, I cannot begin to imagine what's going to happen in this next round. Team Dex Protection have shown everyone the way with this Mardu Vehicles deck, and now we are within touching distance of this Pro Tour trophy. Lucas Esper Berthoud, this is the one round where you're not going to be on the play. Do you think that's going to be a big deal in this final?
Oh, it is. The matchup is pretty brutal. Sideboarded, the dynamics change a little bit, but it will make a difference, for sure.
Well, I can see that Marcio is just pacing around this feature match area. He's keen to get into another final. I'm sure that Luca's feeling very much the same way. We'll be kicking off with this final here at Pro Tour Aether Revolt soon enough. But for now, back to the news desks.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the news desk as we approach the final of Pro Tour Aether Revolt. Rich, BDM, Ian here with you to mark your card, not just for the final that's coming up, but also a look back at the tournament that we've had. So why don't we begin by looking at the leaderboard after 3 rounds. Now remember, there were best part of 55 draft pods going on the first morning. So what did it look like after we'd played those first 3 rounds? There's just some of the undefeated 3-0 lists. Ian, what did you make of Limited?
I thought this limited format was great. One of the better limited formats for the Pro Tour we've had in recent memory. There was a lot of sort of discussion and dissension among the teams about what the best strategies were. The most common thing that I heard from teams is that the format was a touch more aggressive as compared to Triple Kaladesh, and that you really wanted to be in these red-based or red-green aggressive decks. That being said, talking to other teams, they had the mentality that really anything can work, any strategy works as long as you're the only person at the table drafting it. So it's highly important to read the table, to read the signals, and find what's open.
BDM, your take?
I think that this format was much less solved by as wide a portion of the field as Standard was coming into the Pro Tour.
And even among the teams that solved it, they came to different conclusions. So that's arguably not necessarily solved, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean. There were so, like, again, we were talking about the improvised deck, right? That was a big thing that came out of Prague where you were, right? People were talking about that improvised deck and how do you draft it. And so I would literally go 10 feet between two players on Thursday and ask them about drafting the improvised deck. And one person would say, well, don't worry about the payoff for that deck. What you need to do first is draft implements. You need to draft renegade maps. You need to draft that stuff first. Then whatever improvised cards you can find, then you go 10 feet, talk to another player, a different team. Well, the first thing you need to do is take a Maverick Thopterus. Then worry about making it work later. And it was, and I still don't feel like we've come to even a consensus even on that dynamic of, enablers versus payoff.
Lots more to find out about the limited format, but after 3 rounds we move to constructed. This is on Friday. A couple of rounds into that, here's the leaderboard after 5, and now as you can see we're down to the only perfect records left in the building. You see Liu Chen, who made it to the top 8. Martin User at this point was undefeated as well, but plenty of names on the left hand side of your screen. In fact, just looking down there, don't think anyone in the top 10 after 5 rounds made it as far as the top 8. Why don't we look at the end of day 1? This is round 8. BDM.
It was just Cesar Segovia and Liu Yi Chen who were left standing at the end of day 2. Cesar Segovia playing in his first ever Pro Tour, goes 8-0 with a deck he built at the last minute the night before the Pro Tour. How crazy is that? He's going to his first Pro Tour. Feels like his team, the guys he worked with, he came here as a member of the Panamanian national team that top-8'd the World Magic Cup. They all work together. They come up with a deck. They're all on some sort of Jeskai build. And he's just like, I don't want to play that deck. I don't know. I think I can build a really, really aggressive red-black deck. We've seen the Mardu deck stumble a little bit sometimes on the mana, which was his experience as well. And he just built a red-black aggro deck. And and he powered through day 1 with that deck. And what a great story to be able to go to your first Pro Tour and have such a memory. And Liu Yu Chen, what can you say about this guy? He was the last undefeated player, spoilers, for a little while left still in this tournament.
Well, why don't we go to the end of draft? So this is the end of round 11, but at this point, as you say, Liu Yu Chen, he was the last player in the building undefeated, joined by Dimitris Triantafylou of Greece. You see Jan Cassander, who made the top 8. Cesar Segovia went 1 and 2 in his draft and would slip down the field. It didn't go well on day 2. Also worth noting that Ben Stark, he opened 7 and 1, but he had a very difficult day 2. He'll be disappointed. And have a look at Gabriel Nassif there in 14th, already with a draw, and that draw would eventually sort of come up as we went through it. That was round 11. We went back to constructed, round 13 coming up. Let's take a look at the round 13 standings, and now BDM, the top 8 starting to take shape.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw very early on in the tournament Marcio Carvalho not on that, not near the top of the list, and steadily those 2 losses came early and steadily climbing up the board. Now we see him in 3rd place suddenly at 11 and 2, joining Donald Smith playing in his 5th Pro Tour, and Liu Yu Chen at the top of the standings.
So then rounds 14, 3 to go now. How does things stand after 14 rounds? There we are. At this point, we thought Yu Chen, Carvalho, and Smith were pretty much in. Let's go to round 15 for you. So this is the penultimate standings. Marcio utterly in, Yu Chen and Smith confirmed. And then, Ian, we did the whole dance of the tie-break math. And all of a sudden, those players on 11 and 4 started to get very, very interested.
Yeah, indeed, Rich. Often the way that the top 8 breaks is, if you have your 4th loss during the Swiss, you're sore out of luck. But the combination of the new system, right, where players are more incentivized to continue playing through the 15th and 16th rounds, actually causes more players to get knocked out and opens up some spots in the top 8 for some 12 fours to make it. So going into that ultimate round there, tiebreakers were really a big factor there. We had a couple tables where, players were both crossing their fingers not only to win the match, but also to have their tiebreakers hold up to make the top 8.
And to give you a sense of those incentives, Liu Yu Chen and Eduardo Sajgalik drew in the last round of the tournament. And talking to Eduardo, he's like, I shouldn't have done it. He's like, I should not have drawn. He's like, I was so obsessed with the idea of the top 8, right? The status symbol of having another top 8 on my resume, that he's like, I think I made a bad decision in terms of pure EV, because winning that match would have been so insane for me.
Right. It's something that's still relatively new. People are figuring out what to do. And if you think it's as easy as a simple math equation, when you are sitting there and someone offers you a slot in the top 8, it's very hard to turn down just because you think there's better value in playing an extra round. Very tough. But who did make it into the top 8? Let's see the final standings after 16. And what I want to point out here, if you add up the symbols for the teams there, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 15 of the top 20 came from the 35-38% of the field that were on a team, which does stack up the testament for just how strong teams were. Now, talking of teams, why don't we take a look at how the teams ended up? With just one match to go now, here's the leaderboard. MTG Mint card, Eduardo Sajgalik's loss in the semi-final means they remain on 49 points. Masashi, the Japanese superstar squad, are also on 49. And then Dex Army and Dex Third, one of those two, will jump up into 4th place, because BDM, that's where our final is. Dex Army versus Dex Third.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got Marcio Carvalho from the Dex Army, who's going to be playing in the finals, against Esper Berthoud, who's also playing in the finals. You know, all part of this like kind of massive Dex Army team that broke down into 3 or 4 smaller teams for this event.
So let's take a look at our top 8. Here's the bracket, and here's how it all broke down. We began with Jan Cassandra against Paulo Vitor Damarosa. BDM?
Well, you know what? You know, it's hard to root against Paulo Vitor Damarosa, but when you have 6 of the same deck in the top 8 and 2 sort of, even if not rogue decks, but different decks, you kind of want to root on deck sometime, but it was not, well, it was Jan Cassandra's weekend, but it was not his day. And Paulo Vitor Damarosa got past him. A great job by Jan Cassandra, though, to get to his first top 8 in just his 3rd Pro Tour.
Yep, so Paulo Vitor won there. In the bottom half, it was Eduardo Sajgalik actually at a canter over Martinez. It was 3-0 that Eduardo Sajgalik won that one. Ian, back in the top half of the bracket then, Paulo went on to play against Donald Smith, and we now knew that it was Mardu vehicles all the way. This was a tight one, but in the end, Donald Smith made it through.
Yeah, this was the first of many Mardu vehicles mirror matches to come, and in the end it was Donald Smith that pulled through with that win.
So on the bottom half, BDM, Li Yuchen against Eduardo?
Yeah, that went all the way to the limit, and but it was Eduardo Sajgalik who took it in 5 games.
So on we go to the semi-finals. Now it's Donald Smith against Marcio Carvalho. Donald Smith had looked surprised to beat Paulo, and he couldn't beat Marcio. It was 3-1, I think, if memory serves, in that one.
Yeah.
So that brought Marcio Carvalho through to the final, and then BDM, just again, to have 2 players from the same squad facing off in the final, extraordinary.
Again, I think about this in the context of, imagine pre-team series, 2 players from the Pantheon, 2 players from Channel Fireball, 2 players from East-West Bowl meeting in the finals of an event. You know, it's a tremendous success story for that big super team. This is a tremendous story for, you know, Portuguese and Spanish-speaking Magic players in this field.
Well, why don't we hear from the Dex Army squad? On Thursday, 2002 World Champion Carlos Romão came in to tell us all about Dex Army.
Fresh off his top 8 appearance at Pro Tour Kaladesh, Carlos Romão. Carlos, Team Dex Army. I've talked to people about the Dex teams in the past, and I've heard like 40 players play testing for a Pro Tour. How do you guys break down into 6-player squads for this team series?
Actually, we have 2 teams, so we are at 12 testing right now. There is like another team, but this one is the main team from Dex. And I cannot tell you the story because I'm a newcomer of the team. Yeah, I just began testing with the team on Pro Tour Kaladesh, and like this is the first time I'm doing the camping with the guys. But I think we got like a pretty good group of players.
Let's talk about this team. Hall of Famer Willie Adel, a big part of why Dex Army, why this South American, Portuguese, Spanish alliance of teams has formed in the first place.
Let's say he's the Dex Army exists because of Willie Adel. Like, he's the mentor of the Dex Army. He's the guy that gathered all the players. He's the guy like that made this come true. So this is Willie Adel at the team.
And brings a lot of experience to the table. Someone else brings a lot of experience, Marcio Carvalho, one of the hottest players on the Pro Tour right now.
Yeah, and a master on Limited. He's our Limited mentor. He's like, he guides us at the limit portion. He says like, okay, this is a good pick, this is not a good pick. You should follow this kind of line when you are drafting. So Marcio is our Limited specialist.
This Carlos Ramao guy, he's in charge of Factor Fictions.
He's probably the most handsome guy on the tour, my opinion. And I'm trying to get back. I'm trying to get. I think like I still need to improve a lot of stuff. I'm getting back to the tour, so let's say I'm beginning again. I'm on a new journey.
He was in the finals on the last Pro Tour, folks, so he's a little humble too. Yeah. Thiago Saporito, one of the great young Brazilian players.
Sure, yes. Thiago Saporito, probably gonna be at the tour for a long time. Platinum, like very good player. He's helping us at the test. Nothing else to say.
Luis Salvato, 9th place at the last Pro Tour, and someone who's just won a Grand Prix with Marcio.
And then top 8, got a top 8 and GP Santiago. So this guy and this guy, they are very, very hot. They are like doing great on all the tournaments. I think Salvato, he cashed it on all his Pro Tours. So it's a pretty good guy to have on the team.
He also has a top 8 on his resume, and of course, a Pro Tour champion, Antonio Del Moral Leon of Spain. So you got to feel pretty good about this team overall.
Yes, like I think like we have Marcio as the limited master. Like he knows how to draft. He can guide us on the draft. And the other guys, you see the Antonio and Willie, they are very good building decks. So they can like how can I say, bring the best deck we can gather.
And Carlos Ramao, good looking, humble, and pretty damn good at Magic too. So Team Dex Army, look for them this weekend here at Pro Tour Aether Revolt.
This weekend at Pro Tour Aether Revolt.
You know, if you shoot enough of those, you get one right.
Fantastic stuff. All right, so the final. It is Marcio Carvalho against Lucas Esper Berthoud. Let's look at the profile for Marcio Carvalho for you and show you here. There he is, the number 8 ranked player in the world right now. Over 300 lifetime pro points, a sackful more today. 27 already, another 4 if he can win the title. 31 for a Pro Tour title. Here's his deck. Ian, it is of course Mardu vehicles. What's going on in Marcio's deck for people just joining us?
So yeah, it's fairly standard Mardu vehicles deck. The base red-white aggressive deck, leaning very heavily on Heart of Kirin, which we've seen time and again this weekend. Marcio's version in particular, he's trimmed one of the Gideons. He's not playing the full 4. He is playing multiple Shocks. He's not playing Fatal Push, and he has 1 copy of Aether Sphere Harvester.
BDM, the days of 20 mountains and 20 creatures and 20 burn spells. That's not what this deck is about. There are 8 different lands in the land list there. How important are we going to see the sequencing of lands and getting to the right number of colors?
It's certainly, when we've seen this deck lose, mana has certainly been an issue for it. I'm kind of interested in Marcio's version of this deck because I think he's minimized his reliance on black, you know, with only the unlicensed Disintegration really being his main deck option there. So, you know, he can actually function with just 2 colors of mana. This might be the Sly version of this deck.
All right, what about his opponent? It's Lucas Esper Berthoud. Let's take a look at him from Team Dex. 3rd, age 31. This is his first Pro Tour top 8. A perfect record in Constructed. He won all 10 and he won his semi-final. Ian, let's see the list that he's bringing to battle to see if he can go 12-0 and have the perfect constructed record.
So very similar list to Marcio's. Presumably they tested together here as part of the Dex conglomerate here. So very, very similar here. Differences: there's only 2 shocks instead of 3. There's a second copy of Aethersphere Harvester.
Third copy of Inventor's Apprentice.
Oh, right. Slightly different creature configuration as well. But more or less, this is main deck at least very, very close to a mirror match.
All right. Well, they couldn't have drawn it up any better. Here it comes. It's time for the final of Pro Tour Aether Revolt.